Hey everybody, Beth Helvey, Couture Real Estate. It is Monday, October 19th. I guess we're a little bit more than halfway through the month. How are y'all doing today? Are you surviving? It's a beautiful day today. So I want to talk to you about permits. I spent the better part of last week looking at a ton of properties with a handful of buyers. And oh, by the way, sellers, the buyers are here. And I ran into some really strange things, and I want to basically give a warning. So one of the things I do before I go out and show property is I pull up all the permits, and it's easy to do because this is public information. You know, you don't have to be a realtor to find this. You don't have to have a special license. Finding a permit is public information. I will give a caution that there's a couple places like the city of Sarasota and the city of Venice where you have to dig a little deeper into their site and it's set up a little odd. But if you're looking for county permits, it's a little bit easier. So there's that. And I always do that before we go to properties so that I can let the buyer that I'm representing know how old everything is, how old the systems are, things like that. Because not all that information is in the public remarks. And some of it is, some of the information they put in the public remarks is what they think the buyer wants to know, like air conditioning and roof. But there's other things that have to be permitted, like doors, windows, electric panels, fences, concrete slabs, things like that. So anyway, I could go on and on. Here's what I'm finding. I don't even know how many houses I saw last week. I don't know, 25, 30, something like that. And I ran into a lot of issues. Here's what I ran into. I ran into issues where the public remarks claimed that a certain part of the house, the roof, the AC, whatever, was X years old, and there was no permit for it. Now, to be perfectly honest, if I ran into that on one house or maybe two, I would probably say that it was a permit that may have gotten caught in the system, maybe wasn't processed correctly, things like that, because that does happen. You know, and sometimes you have to do a proper lien search. Occasionally, paperwork snafus happen. So we have to think about that. But I ran into it a lot. I ran into it a lot with agents that listed property that did a fair amount of business and probably got the information from the owner without checking the permits first. So if you do that, there probably should be a note in the remarks somewhere, the realtor remarks, not the public remarks, that you have the paperwork to back it up, okay? Or you're working on closing out a permit or getting the permit approved or something of that nature, okay? Because I ran into it way too many times that was being claimed. And to be perfectly honest, if you don't have a permit for it, I'm actually going to question the roof, okay, or the AC, or the electric panel, or the fence, or whatever. I ran into another house where the owner / flipper was there and told me that all kinds of stuff was new. Clearly it wasn't. So I asked him, there's no permits for this. Did you pull a permit? He didn't know. And then I said, okay, great. You must keep all your receipts. You've got invoices to back it up, and then we can just, make sure the permits are there, and then if not, we can take care of that for you. He didn't know. So he's telling people that certain systems in the house are either brand new or a couple years old, but he can't back it up. That is a huge, huge flag, okay? But somebody's going to fall for it. And somebody's not going to do the paperwork, and somebody's not going to check. And that's what's frightening. And then I went to another house where I did my permit check, and the listing agent showed us the property, and the listing agent didn't know how old anything was because the listing agent didn't pull the permits before they actually listed the property. You need to make sure that sellers, if your listing agent doesn't show up to your appointment to talk to you about listing the property and they haven't already pulled the permits on your house and brought it to you to make sure they have the information right and everything's clear, then interview a few more people, okay? Because that's important. So I know I've gotten onto permits before, and I know I probably sound like, on my soapbox type of thing, and this does get me a little salty, and here's why. I have sold too many houses either as a listing agent or helped somebody buy them where the permits weren't done. And this is why it's so stupid that they're not pulled. I know people out there are saying, oh, it's just the government and they're just trying to make money and blah, 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 blah. No, they're not. Permits are $300. $300. If you're spending $15,000 on a roof, $300 is a drop in the bucket, okay? Here's why it's important. Because they're doing a couple things. They're checking to make sure that whomever is doing that service for you is properly licensed. They're also going to go back and inspect what was done to make sure it was done properly. And if it wasn't, then now the county can tell the contractor, you got to fix this. And you as the consumer know it was done right. I'll give you a couple of examples. I had a house I sold several years ago where they hired a contractor to redo their kitchen. And a contractor never pulled permits, not one, and they needed to. I looked the guy up. He wasn't a contractor. He didn't even have a license. He was a handyman. And he wasn't. That's why they do permits. And there's two reasons why they will lie to you. One, they don't have a license. And two, they don't want their work inspected when they're done. Because after this property was inspected, there were issues of things not done properly. Okay? So what do you do when you're hiring somebody? Well, looking up licenses is also public information. Did you know that? Did you know that you can look up my license as a realtor? You can find out when I was licensed, with whom I hang my license, where my brokerage is, what the address of that brokerage is. You can also find out when my license expires, and you can find out if I've had any infractions against my license. Hey, Marty. You can do the same thing with contractors, hairdressers, who else? Insurance brokers. Anybody who has a license where they have to sit and take an exam and continue to renew the license and take CEUs. You can look this information up. So if dude comes to you and says, hey, I'm a licensed contractor, and no, you don't need a permit for that, look him up, okay, and then hire somebody else. Because, he's not paying for the permit, you are. Part of that, part of your cost as the consumer is that they're passing the permitting monies, the cost of it to you. So it's not like he's taking that cost on himself. He's just filing the paperwork. That's it. So it's not like it's any money out of his pocket. It's $300, maybe $350. It's not that much. Okay. So y'all need to be really, really careful about this. And part of the reason they got so strict is, like after Andrew blew through and after we've had major storms blow through, there's a lot of people that get taken advantage of with their roofs. And the roofs end up leaking after a couple years or something like that. So Sarasota County in particular is really getting strict on this sort of thing, okay? Now, if you happen to be a seller and you haven't owned your house for very long, but for whatever reason, you're gonna sell your house. And when you bought your house, obviously you didn't use me, you used somebody else. And then when we get together to sell your house, we find out that there is a permitting issue. That's okay, I can help you with that. There are ways to either go back and try to get it permitted, and there's ways to sell the property so that you can sell it legally. You can notify your buyer that there isn't a permit, okay? And you don't get caught up in a lot of that red tape and stuff like that. There are ways to take care of this, okay? If you're a buyer and you're buying a house and we find out that something isn't permitted and you're like, that's fine, that's okay, I'm gonna tear that out anyways. There are ways to take care of that. There are ways to purchase the property as well, okay? There's ways to do this. So sellers, if you are selling your property and you know that you have something that hasn't been permitted and you use our FAR/BAR contract, guess what? You're gonna have to have that permitted and you're gonna have to have it fixed, okay? The as-is contract doesn't make you do that. The FAR/BAR does. So be really careful because that is a big difference between those two contracts. And I understand that. I understand there's people out there who own properties that after they get in, they find out that something wasn't permitted that should have been, especially if they're coming from out of state. They just don't know how we work here. And they get caught up in this whole permitting issue. And I get it, okay? But as a buyer, You need to know this information. After last week, it's gotten to the point where I take my laptop with me, and if we make a last minute appointment, I pull up the permits while we're standing there at the house. Okay, because there's just so much misinformation out there right now, and just because it says in the comments that the roof is X years old, the AC is X years old, and things like that, you need to pull a permit, and you need to see what the permit says, and you need to see that the permit actually backs up that claim. Okay, it's really important. So this is one of my soapbox things. I tend to get a little salty about this because it really bothers me when there's people out there, like that flipper I ran into, who is basically trying to take advantage of people, and that's what he's doing. He's trying to take advantage of somebody who isn't going to dig deep and make sure that the job he did was actually properly done, and that there won't be issues in the future. And it really bothers me. So that's my little soapbox thing on permits. If you have any questions on how this works, send me a DM or throw it in the comments. I can send you some information on it. I can help you find the website if you want to look up your contractor's license or your realtor's license. I can help you find that out too. In the state of Florida, okay, this is the state of Florida. If you're looking at properties and you're wondering how this whole permitting thing works, send me a DM or throw it in the comments. I'm happy to answer any questions because I know people do tend to get confused on this, especially those people who come from another state, okay? But like I said, Sarasota County is cracking down on this and getting more strict because more and more people are getting taken advantage of, and that's what they're trying to prevent. So it is October 19th. It is Monday. It is beautiful. I think it's going to be just below 90 today. It's going to be gorgeous. If you have the chance, get out there and get some sunshine. Wear your sunscreen, drink a lot of water. And if you have any other real estate questions, I'd love to hear them. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.